Sam, how are you?
I feel like we always do the exact same. Hello.
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 Fancy seeing you here. How bloody funny.
How funny.
How the devil are you?
I'm the devil good. I'm good. I have had I'm the devil good. I've had a good weekend. I've had a nice week.
Yeah.
It's been a bit of like a eventful week, but not a bad one. How about you?
Oh, I had a very eventful week. You know about my eventful week, don't you?
I do. Tell everyone about your eventful week.
Me and my boyfriend discovered a stray kitten on the side of the road as soon as we got out of an Uber on the way back from a birthday party, and took it in because it clearly needed taking in, and have ended up fostering a kitten between me and my flatmates, which is quite hard work and quite a lovely kitten that we are getting rehomed and probably fostered by someone else soon, so we'll have to say a sad goodbye. But it's been an eventful weekend. There's a lot of difficult steps involved in discovering a kitten and all the things that come afterwards. If you are lucky enough to be kind of blessed by the cat distribution network, I believe, which I actually wasn't aware of the concept of.
Oh, me neither.
I posted all my Instagram stories, and like 5 individual people were like, "You've been blessed! Like, it's the cat distribution network. You've been blessed."
I had never heard of this.
What? And they're like, "You have to keep it. Like, it's a gift from the universe. Of like, it's your cat." So I was feeling really like, "Oh my god, is it my cat?" But we're not set up to have a cat, sadly, in my place, and I'd love to keep. So we were also watching the Traitors final with our new kitten, and we were like, we'll have to call her Claudia. Turns out she's a he. So he's called Claude now. And there was the potential that there was going to be another stray that we picked up because the volunteer from the council that we've been talking to, who like semi-professionally rescues cats, and I don't think gets paid for it. The council's just kind of stuck her mobile number on the website, and I think she just does it for free just because she loves cats. She was like, "Oh, there might be a sibling out on the road. I've heard there's another cat around. Can you go and look for it?" And we didn't find that. Someone else did. And we were like, "Oh, if you find it."
But was that going to be Claudia?
Well, no, I was going to say, because we've already got Claude. Let's go for the next word. We can call it either Wink or...
Claude and Wink, that's so cute.
Claude and Wink would be quite cute. Or we thought we could call it Faith for faithful.
Oh, but then you'd have to find a third one called Trait.
Trait.
Trait
doesn't quite work, isn't it? Trait.
I think Wink would have been so cute. Wink is a really cute cat name. I mean,
Wink
Claude's obviously
nice
lovely
name
too, but Wink is a very cute cat name.
Claude, Wink, and Faith.
Oh my goodness, that is mad. I mean, we've both had a bit of a traitory weekend where we actually saw each other for a friend's birthday, and then you left to go find this cat, which was obviously the cat distribution centre.
I didn't go to look. I didn't know I was going to meet my
No,
fate.
fate was pushing you. No, whether or not you knew you were, that was what you were doing.
Fate pushed me to not go out
Fate
with you.
was pushing you to not go out, which I'm glad that you did, because then you found Faith.
Yes.
Nope, you didn't. You found Claude.
Yes.
And so I went out for a friend's birthday at a bar in Central. Unbeknownst to me, I knew it was the Traitors finale, and I'd missed it. And bear in mind, I'm there at 9 p.m. every single day watching the Traitors, but because it was the friend's birthday, I couldn't go. So I went out and I was like, right, I'm going to stay off social media. I'm not going to look at anything I don't want this sport for. I'm going to watch it first thing tomorrow. And then I go upstairs in the bar, and unbeknownst to me, they had done a screening of the finale with all of the cast in London. And half of the cast of the Traitors were suddenly in the bar that I was in. And bear in mind, I'd had a few bevs. I'd had a couple of things to drink. And you know me, I love a natter on a night out. So I immediately go up to Ross. And I'm also freaking out that Ross from the Traitors, Diane from the Traitors wasn't there, but Ross is.
But Ross is.
And I had gone up to him, I was like, "Oh my god, this is like, I just bloody loved you on this show." And he was like, "Oh, thanks." I was like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Oh, we just all screen, blah, blah, blah." And then I saw Jasmine, and Jasmine is as gorgeous as you would imagine. And she's also the loveliest person. And I was chatting with her, and I was like, "I haven't seen it." And she was like, "Oh, I don't want to tell you anything." And I was like, "Babe, go on, just if anyone's going to spoil
the Traitors, it's going to be Jasmine."
And it's going to be Jasmine. And I'm not going to say who won, because anyone who's listened to this might not have seen it, but Jasmine told me who won, and I was like, I knew it. And the night, I think Jazz was there in the corner, and the night ended with me being sat next to Evie and her wife and having like a half an hour chat with Evie's wife.
Did he meet Evie's wife?
I met Evie's wife, and I was sat,
Oh
I didn't actually chat with
God.
Evie. Evie was chatting with everyone else, but I was sat with Evie's wife, and I was like, how's it been? They were like, oh my God, it's been the most amazing thing. Like, as a partner, like,
my
this has been so
God.
great.
I didn't know you
It's
met
been so
her.
lovely. Yeah, I was fully
How
sat with her just having a
funny.
nap. So it ended up in the bar. You've been in this bar
I
before.
have.
It's like a big
We
chair
can name the bar.
and a table,
was
like
it
a sofa.
Freedom?
Yeah, it was Freedom. It was Freedom in Soho. And there's a bit, I know it would never be my
Gross.
first choice. And there's a great big sofa area by the window at the front, and they were all just kind of sat around there. And you know me, I'm confident as anything. I just sat down with
You
them.
did. You
and
are
just kind of,
you
you
love
yeah.
a natural night out. I'm overstimulated
Love a natural
enough.
night
Like
out.
adding a new conversation to it just doesn't come into my mind. Like, will I enter a
loved it.
conversation in the smoking area? Maybe, but for the most part, I'm like, I'm just absorbing
I was
what's
just like-
happening around me.
When am I ever going to be in a situation again surrounded by the cast of The
Yes.
Traitors? Ironically, and possibly one of the most popular series of The Traitors. So yeah, that was part of my weekend. So it was a traitor-filled weekend all
Yeah,
round.
and they're riding the high of their celebrity status at the minute as well.
Oh, they were loving it. I could tell if they were like not in the mood for it. Like I love Anata, but I'm not like tone deaf. If I could tell they were trying to just like keep themselves. Baby, they loved it. They were lapping it up.
You're a little. No, I'm kidding.
Well, but yeah, I think I was a bit starstruck when I met Ross. I was like, oh my God, it's Ross of.
Ross
Do
is-
you know that Claudia calls Diana and Ross the Supremes?
Oh, yes.
because it's Diana
But
and
apparently
Ross.
that was like
Diana
that
Ross,
was the code
Supremes.
name for them as well when they were talking about them behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Because they couldn't reveal the family link. I'm amazed it stayed secret that long in the show.
I know. Is this where we start our unofficial Traitors podcast?
You know, the official Traitors podcast is doing well enough. I wouldn't dare rival that. And
It beat Love
Uncloaked-
Island, didn't it?
I think the podcast was getting more listeners than Love Island was getting viewers.
Yeah, well, they would reveal. I only saw clips of it, but they'd reveal to them who the Faithfuls and Traitors were. And I saw the one with Diane's reaction to finding out who the traitors were, and then she told Miles that she was Ross's mum.
Yes.
And it was just so good. It was so good.
Excellent television, like genuinely some of the best TV.
Beautiful piece of television.
Beautiful piece of television. Stephen Moffat did a post today. Speaking of
Oh, yeah?
Doctor Who, coming back to that. Steve Moffat did a post today on Instagram and was like, oh my God, like people working in TV everywhere have just gone white with fear because we'll never be able to top that. Like, how can we possibly compete with the Traitors?
It's wild though, because I think about like the culture of mass viewing and everyone's talking about how TV's dying to streaming. This year particularly, I know that, you know, I'm very much not on like the Love Island trains and the Married at First Sight, and I know that this isn't a new thing, but I haven't been as involved in something like Big Brother when everyone I know is watching it, and then The Traitors, everyone I know is watching it, like those kinds of shows. So I don't know, it's interesting to see where the line of television goes. But we do know May is going to be filled with a certain Time Lord.
It's going to be filled by a certain Time Lord. I think like it reaffirms still that viewing figures across the board are just different to what they ever were. I think like the overnights, even for the Traitors final, were in like the 7 million mark, which isn't a million miles away from where kind of like Ruby Road's Christmas viewing figures were. So I think the benchmark is just very different to what it was back when we had like Doctor Who Christmas specials getting 13 million viewers or something absurd like that.
Well, even the episode Doctor Who we're talking about today, I mean, I'll spill the beans in a minute, but it's not far off that. And this was 2012. This was very much like sort of pre-streaming.
Yeah.
So those aren't bad numbers.
Yeah. And then if you go back to the classics where everyone had 4 channels they could watch at any time, no streaming networks and no DVD players. But yeah. Today's episode, yes, we should segue towards what we're doing today, shouldn't we? Is there a
Yes.
smooth transition for that? Not really.
Well, we're talking about faithfuls and traitors and people you can trust. I don't know if the Doctor can trust the voice coming through the microphone of Miss Osmond Oswald. Everything might not be as it seems.
Oh, that was all right. That was all right.
Thank you. It wasn't great. It was a slightly
It wasn't
comfortable.
great.
We got there. So, in case you haven't already noticed, and if you haven't, it is the title of the episode, we're talking about Asylum of the Daleks, which was one that you chose, actually. I said to you, I was like, what's one that you just want to do? And you were like, I really want to do this.
Asylum. It just appealed to me. I wasn't aware that it was in any way a contentious episode. I didn't think that there was
Me neither.
any meaningful discourse around this. It turns out that there is. But I just thought it was a very solid episode. I heard some people didn't like it, but I wonder if that's kind of in the context of there being a few clunky episodes, a few hit and misses in this series, and maybe it's kind of unfortunately opening up that series. I don't know what it is. I mean, you'll know more about this. I think you've had a little bit more of a look at the discourse than me. I've actually not bothered to dive into it.
Yeah, no, I've had a little bit of a look into it, which we'll go into in a bit. I kind of, to be honest, I do like this episode, but it's never like on my top of my rewatch list. For anyone who's like an avid Wholala listener, you'll know this. Like, this episode comes up quite a lot between us two, and especially I think from you, Alasdair. There's a line from this, which I'll leave for you to do later, that you just say all the time and end up sounding like Alan Rickman. But I was kind of unbeknownst to any discourse either, and it turns out, it's a little bit of a divisive one. Some people love it, some people hate it, and it's an interesting one.
It's very interesting, very interesting. A dog's come and sat at my feet in the time that Sam was speaking, so I didn't really listen to a word he said.
Oh no, well you never do anyway.
I don't really. What are you doing, Cleo? Come on. She's staring at me like she's haunted.
Well, if Alice is not going to listen, hopefully some of the listeners will, as I give you a little context for this episode. So Asylum of the Daleks was the first episode of Series 7A, which I think Series 6 was the first that they decided to split them into Series A and B. If I remember correctly, they split this over 2 years. I think Series 7A was 2012 and then Series 7B was 2013, right. Whereas I believe Series 6, much as it was split between like spring and autumn. Yeah. So I remember at the time being a bit grumbly because it felt like a 5-episode series, which I still feel a bit like they treated it like that. And it originally aired on the 1st of September 2012 to a viewership of 8.33 million and an IMDb score of 8.5 out of 10. So generally, I think people agree with you that it's good.
It's a good episode. Let's just be honest about it. Let's be honest about it.
Let's be honest. It's a good episode. And if you haven't seen this episode recently, my advice is to always just jump in and watch it. It's on iPlayer. You can watch it for free if you have a TV license, wink, wink. But if you haven't seen the episode recently, you want a little recap.
I do. Grow up.
I have a TV license. Get a job. But if you haven't seen the episode in a while and you'd like a little recap, here is a little episode summary for you to listen to.
The Doctor, having been led into a trap by Dala, is kidnapped by the Daleks and taken to the Parliament of the Daleks. Joined by him are nearly divorced Amy and Rory, who've been similarly kidnapped from present-day Earth. The Doctor is surprised when the Daleks ask him for help. The Alaska, a starliner that crashed into a planet housing insane, battle-scarred Daleks called the Asylum, has ruptured the planet's force field, risking the escape of the insane Daleks. To prevent this, the Parliament wants to destroy the planet remotely, but the force field is still too strong to allow that, and Daleks are too scared to go down to the planet below.
So the Daleks task the Doctor, Amy and Rory with deactivating the force field from inside the planet. After arriving, the Doctor, surmising that the Daleks will destroy the planet as soon as he deactivates the force field, plots an escape via a nearby teleporter which will transport them onto the Dalek ship. Oswald, a surviving crew member of the Starship Alaska, agrees to deactivate the force field in return for the Doctor coming to her rescue. Meanwhile, Amy and Rory reconcile their marriage, with Amy revealing that she let Rory go when she learned that her captivity at Demon's Run rendered her unable to have children.
The Doctor makes his way to Oswin, venturing through a section that holds Daleks who survived encounters with him. Oswin saves the Doctor from these Daleks by removing any memories of him from the Daleks' collective telepathically shared knowledge. The Doctor enters Oswin's chamber and discovers to his horror that she is a Dalek. Oswin is revealed to have been captured by Daleks after the Alaska crashed on the Asylum, and, to preserve her genius-level intellect for Dalek use, was turned into a Dalek herself.
Gagatrina. Now, unable to cope with her conversion, her mind retreated into a fantasy of survival as a human. Oswin fulfills her promise of deactivating the force field, however, making her final request that the Doctor remembers her as the human she once was. The Doctor returns to a now reconciled Amy and Rory, and they teleport back to the TARDIS just as the planet is destroyed. The Daleks fail to recognise the Doctor, revealing the magnitude of Oswin's removal of the Doctor from the Daleks' hive intelligence. He returns Amy and Rory home, where Rory moves back in with Amy.
Wow, good summary. Did you write that?
Maybe. Maybe not. I'll let you decide. I'll let you, the audience, decide.
Oh, Wholala is going to get done for plagiarism. No, it's good. It's good.
It's fine.
It's good.
It's good.
We
It's
actually did change some of the words there.
We did change some of the words.
See if you can work out where we ad-libbed, ladies and gentlemen.
Listen, every single week I write a summary for the thing, and this week I didn't have it in me. I did everything else, but I didn't have it in me.
That's all right. That's all right.
But you know what we did do? And by we, I mean Alasdair. We tweeted on the Wholala account, and again, by we, I mean Alasdair, saying that we were going to be covering Asylum of the Daleks on the podcast this week, and we asked you for some of your thoughts.
Yes, and you gave us your thoughts. You wrote to us at our PO box at the Blue Peter Garden, and here's what you had to say. We peeled open your letters with our Blue Peter dog. Ethan said, it has its fun moments, but I think the story should have been 2 parts. I personally dislike how it was marketed as featuring every Dalek ever, yet it doesn't utilise any of them aside from the Bronze Boys. Jenna Coleman as Oswin is for sure my main highlight of the episode.
Hamish Steele, the guest we had on last week, said, stunning, wonderful, never got the hate. Best Dalek story since Parting of the Ways. The Osmond reveals, and that she was in the episode and who she was, both dropped my jaw. 10 out of 10.
Hill said, I know the divorce bit is controversial, but I think the infertility behind it tackles the classic sci-fi, what it means to be human question, just as much as Oswin becoming a Dalek, or the mad Daleks themselves do, personally. I love this episode.
George said, definitely an underrated and quite creepy Dalek story. The main trio still work together and play off each other despite their strained relationship that they have to work out was great. And for a new viewer, the Osmond twist was a shocker.
Joe said this was actually his first Docky Who app. Not seen it since it aired, but it was clearly good enough for me.
At Strudy Hoover says, love this one. It's got such a unique askew energy, full of tricks, fakes, things not quite right. And I'll defend the divorce as one of those things. It's all rooted in assumption, like the idea that it'll be a long-running, quote, thing that Rory loves Amy more than she loves him.
Should we talk about what we liked? Or should we just end the episode there?
That was what you all said. Goodbye.
All right, so remember to follow the pod.
No, we're going to talk about what we thought, Alice. So tell me something you liked.
Okay, I'll start a bit like chronologically what my thoughts were today.
Okay.
Matt Smith's Doctor, I think, is so grown up at this point. I feel like Matt Smith is really in his swing now. Everything, the voice, the mannerisms, the duality of the childish Doctor that he does and the kind of scary old man are both there. And the intro we get, when he meets Darla on Skaro, he's playing the scary Doctor and he's kind of playing the Doctor of the Legends. And it's like, they say you can get people out of the camps. They say you can help. It's like, oh, I wish they'd stop. And he's doing his kind of stern face and stomping around his boots. And he's believably like the Doctor from the Legends in that. Like this, even the silhouette of Matt Smith as the Doctor at this point is super iconic.
Yeah.
And I love it. And just the little mannerisms, everything he does, his little, like, it just, I don't know, even the way he kind of hangs his head, it all works really nicely.
Yeah.
And then he can switch that up so quick into like, oh, that's me on the triangle. I got lost in the mix. And oh, don't be fair to the Daleks when they fire me at a planet. And he goes back into kind of, oh, I'm just a silly guy. I'm just a silly normal guy.
There's one line that I really like from that where he whispers to Rory and he's basically saying, I'm willing to sacrifice myself for you. But the way he says it, he goes, if it ever gets too explody-wody in here, you go without me. And I love that, like, even when he does, because I agree with you, he kind of walks the line between the oncoming storm and the Predator and the silly Doctor that we've all sort of come to know and love. I just really like the way that his Doctor's written by this point. Because we were saying before when we looked at, like, the 11th Hour, we felt like Series 5, 11th Doctor is a bit, like, undercooked and, like, Matt Smith isn't quite sure of how he's deciding to play him, and Series 6 where it gets built up, and I think by this point he's really truly in his stride as the character.
I think that's a personal thing for me though, because I think some people do like actually prefer the Series 5 Doctor.
Really?
And just like him how he turns up at the start. I think that is it for some people, where he turns up and he's a little bit more like, he's almost got a little bit more of like a blokiness to him at the very start, and it's a bit like, all right.
He's like, you're my mate.
Watcher.
Whereas by the end, he's like, oh no, like he's a lot more nasal.
Yeah, he's got like a poshness in there. He feels much more Troughton.
Yeah, I think he's a bit more Pertwee by the end, personally. I think he starts more Troughton and he ends more Pertwee. That's how I... That's what I think. That's how I see it.
Oh, go on then.
I really like how caring he is in this episode as well. Like, he's just very good at, like you said, being funny and being dramatic, but he's very caring, like, to Amy, to Rory, to the people on the Alaska, to Oswin, arguably even to the Daleks. Like, he's always looking out for people, and there's that really nice line that I like between Amy and the Doctor where she says about her marriage, like, it's not something you can fix, like you fix your bow tie. And then, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but when he eventually does fix it, he kind of pauses to camera and wiggles his bow tie and then carries on walking, and I just think that's really sweet.
you're right. The way he interacts with the Daleks in this is so interesting as well. There's a theme throughout this about the way he talks about Daleks. There's obviously like a fear in there, and there's moments where he's really scared of the Daleks. You know, when he's trapped in a corner with 3 of the ones he's defeated as, I think, like the first, second, and third Doctor. I can't remember how early those Daleks are from. And he's terrified because he's totally unarmed. He's totally backed into a corner. They're not Daleks you can reason with. They've got a plunger and they're coming for him, and that's really scary. But in the Parliament particularly, he really speaks to the Daleks with this kind of level of condescension.
Yeah, and at the end, like even when they're talking at the end, he becomes, I think, very like swaggery at the end, like when they've all forgotten who he is and they're like, Doctor Who, and he goes, fellas, you're never going to stop asking. Like it really carries on nicely from series 6 where he's trying to like make himself smaller, and I think that even though he didn't consciously make them forget who he was, it was Oswin. I think that it plays well into that narrative. Talking about the Doctor and Darla, I really, really like that this episode starts with such a cold open. I know we do have the prequel, but you're kind of just thrown into the adventure. I do wonder why, because Skaro, I think by this point is meant to be destroyed, and he just kind of turns up there as if like he could turn up to Gallifrey.
I was going to say, like, Skaro is such a confusing planet in Doctor Who, because it's definitely been destroyed. I feel like it's gone more than once.
It was destroyed in the Time War, because then when in the 12th Doctor, they're like, they rebuilt it. Like Missy's like, oh my God, they rebuilt it.
They
like
made
it's
another
Skaro.
one. Yeah.
Made another one. Yeah.
The 7th Doctor, I think, destroyed one as well, didn't he? With the Hand of Omega or something at some point.
Probably. But then it's in the TV movie because they go to Skaro to execute the Master.
Yeah,
we need to do that at some point.
I think my impression was that either they keep visiting it in different times, or it's just, I think it's almost like the Daleks themselves, right? Always finds a way back.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. On that idea, I really like in this cold open that we're not waiting for a reveal of a Dalek, because by this point the episode's called Summon Daleks. We know it's a Dalek story, so from the get-go, they're like, this is a Dalek story. So you're intrigued in other ways. Like, I think that the whole head conversion thing where you get the eye stalk out of the corpse and they kind of use as puppets, like, you really like build on Dalek lore in this episode.
Yeah. I thought I was going to say exactly the same thing, Sam. You wouldn't believe.
The same
we plan our notes separately. Would you believe that? Do you want to know what I've written on the page? This will shock you. Deepening the Dalek lore.
Oh, we really do. Hive mind is hive mind.
Yeah, I was going to say, great creepy concept. Again, we talked about this in a different episode. I think what do we call it? Moffat and the Monsters, for anyone who's particularly keen. And that he is, I think we'd say, probably the master in the Doctor Who world of writing. He's not the master.
Pardon the pun?
The master of writing really scary monsters and real sort of nightmare creations. And they talk about the puppets in this as like things that have been like emptied out, like emptying out people and turning them into puppets. And there's a creepy little dialogue that happens in the Parliament.
I know exactly what you're going to say. I have this. Is it the bit with the woman? I have this note as well.
You had a daughter.
I know. I've read my file.
Oh, exactly that. And it's just like, but she says it in such a like smiley smug way, and it creates this like, oh, is that her but converted? Is that
you're like, no, this is the blank person who's like, yeah, I read the file of this vessel I'm walking around in.
Is it like a Dalek version of a person? Because it's all about conversion. In a way, it's
very Cyberman-y.
It's very Cyberman-y, isn't it? It's almost like they took a few tricks off them.
More so with Oswin, and we'll talk about this later, but in that conversion, I was like, I don't think Daleks have ever really done this before, and it felt almost like this would have worked better as a Cyberman story. But I mean, I love the Daleks, and I think one thing I like is when the Daleks use different species as slaves. It happens a lot in classic Who, like the Ogrons, and then obviously like the pig slaves in series 3. So there are often cases where they need people to support them because they are just kind of like rolling pepper pots. Like they sometimes need people to do other stuff. I like the idea of them taking like corpses of like hollowed out people, and
you like the idea of them taking corpses.
I love the idea of it, and
you're sick.
And it's just like another extension, because I feel like, I know like the pig slave idea, it's them like manipulating people into a form that's useful for them, and I think that's what they're doing here. It really does, I think, like I said, build on Dalek lore. I mean, even them having a concept of beauty, I think, like, just builds on it.
That
more.
bit I love. The Prime Minister in this I really like. The Prime Minister of the Daleks gets the privilege of being fully nude. which is, I think,
On show.
like either it's a humiliation thing and they're like, okay, you can be in charge, but you've got to be naked. That's like
They would have said it to the
price.
Emperor as well. The Emperor as well.
Sure, like, okay, you can play God, but you must be nude, and maybe that's something we should start to enforce. Actually, I actually don't want that at all. The second thing about the Prime Minister's voice.
Go on, do it, please. I think you've done it about 3 times on here, but do it here.
I can't get it right, but it's just like, he's like, there's another bit. It's not, does it surprise you to know? It's just, it's something about like, it's so funny.
Does it surprise you to know that the Daleks have a concept of beauty?
He's like, just got a little bit more articulation than a normal Dalek.
It's like a little bit of a, like, not emotion, that's not necessarily the wrong word, but like smugness. Like, it's got a personality. I think it's got more of a personality than Daleks.
I was going to say, I couldn't think of the word. The word I wanted is enunciate, and I was going to say, what's that thing Ariana Grande doesn't do?
Yeah.
He can enunciate a bit better than almost a normal Dalek does.
I think you can say than Ariana Grande.
Because he doesn't have the modulator and the machine, it's almost as if you're getting a bit more of a natural Dalek's voice. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like they've almost, because he's the Prime Minister and has a specific role, they've almost like uncapped him a little bit.
It's a bit like in Dalek 2005, when the Dalek opens its casing and is ordering Rose to order it to kill itself, basically. And it just, the way it talks is a little more like an alien rather than like a mechanized, like, thing. Like you said, it doesn't have the voice modulation. That's kind of what it reminds me of, but he was just kind of screaming about suicide. And this Dalek was a little bit more authoritative.
Does it surprise you to know that Daleks have a concept of beauty? It goes Alan Rickman every time I do it. It's never right.
It really does.
It's never right.
I know, but it's a nice homage to both of them.
There was lovely bits in this. Yeah, the Dalek puppets were one part. There's even a Teletubbies CCTV camera that straddles that line again of kind of scary and creepy, but also silly. It's silly that there is a Teletubbies CCTV camera playing Carmen.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of silly camp held within that. But I think that this episode does a good job of walking the line between trying to make the Daleks scary again, which I know was Stephen Moffat's intention, and still having silly like that. Like, I'm not looking for countermand, dear. I'm looking for reverse. And then, like, there's one, I in my lows for this episode, I only have one low. I have a few mixed points. I only have one low, and it's a tiny, tiny, tiny Dalek-related thing. You know when Oswin realizes that she's a Dalek and she's saying exterminate, it goes exterminate, 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 and it kind of like turns into a sob. They use that soundbite 3 times in this episode for 3 different Daleks, and it really pisses me off. It like there's 3 different, so it's obviously most known for that bit, but there's 3 moments in the episode where like insane Daleks go exterminate, 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 and I can tell it's the same clip. They've just like, they were like, no one's gonna note it. Well, you know what, Doctor Who sound designers, I know what I noticed, and it bugged me a lot because it's so good in that Osmond scene, and I really, really love it. It's some great voice work from Nicholas Briggs, but I'm like, I wish you hadn't used it twice. Oh, you did it again 3 times.
That's so funny. I didn't notice it at all. We'll talk more about that sobbing Dalek, I think, when we get to the final twist at the end and talk about it as part of that. The point I was going to make earlier is I'm now wondering, would this have been a good Cyberman story? I think the answer is yeah. Because if we think about, the Parliament of the Cybermen would be really funny. I feel like at that point it would almost become more of a political allegory for like a parliament full of people devoid of their humanity and emotions and blah, 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 blah. You can make a point there. And you can have a cyber leader at the middle of it. And that would probably work really well, actually. And Asylum of the Cybermen as well would be great because it become almost like you can keep the whole zombie thing, but it's just Cybermen. Makes more sense almost for them as well. And then you have all these creepy, rusty Cybermen with arms missing. You could have a bit of body horror within that. You could have bits of bones if you wanted to go really far with it. You could almost make it a bit gory, and you could have them start to wake up and chase people. It'd be a bit like a zombie horror.
The more you talk about it, you know the scene with Amy where she's slowly sort of having the Dalek hive mind thing affect her vision and she sees all the Daleks as people. You could have it where she's seeing the Cybermen as the people that were converters. There's all these different humans that had been converted. It's basically the exact same scene. But then I can imagine the Doctor being like, those aren't people, look. And then it cuts to and all these, like you said, body horror. And you can do the exact same sort of nostalgia thing as you're doing with the Daleks, where it's Cybermen from different designs. And like you said, I think in the Starship Alaska, maybe like you see some of the corpses of people who like have had bits of them taken out for Cybermen.
Yeah.
And maybe like some of them have become like Mondasian Cybermen with the different suits. Like, I actually think
terrifying.
I actually think the
It'd be
little
horrible.
flaws in this episode because of the Dalek sort of plot points would be fixed had it been Cybermen. Because Daleks aren't known to convert people. Like, that's not a very Dalek thing, and I think that would have worked really well as a Cyberman story.
Like, very successfully as well. There's a bit of a theory that when Amy sees all these people dancing around and then looks back and realizes that they're Daleks, that those are all people who've been converted. One of the people spinning around is a ballerina with red hair.
Yeah.
And some people think that that is the missing daughter from the opening of the episode when she's like, my daughter was in a Dalek prison camp. She looks quite similar to the Dalek puppet Dala at the start. What's the name of the daughter? People think it's her. Hannah. So, I mean, maybe not. Maybe it's just a hallucination. But, you know, if Oswin got converted, what's to say they didn't convert more people from the rest of the ship? I mean, just awesome. Really creepy moments like that are brilliant. I love as well when Amy can see the room for what it is, and there was that ballerina spinning around. It's just a 1960s Dalek and just spinning
around.
So,
help me.
And I mean, we later get even more expansion on the Dalek lore in The Magician's Apprentice. In the next series 8. I think
Series 9. Series
9. Okay, we wait a little bit longer. And that's where we find out that Daleks can't really die. I mean, maybe that had been explored before, but here we really solidify the idea that Dalek flesh doesn't die.
It just kind of decays.
It just kind of decays, but it doesn't die. So all these insane Daleks in here, maybe they're dormant, but they're alive.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing in intensive care, because Oswin says, I kept wanting to write, when I was making my notes this episode, Clara, but obviously it's not, it's Oswin, that she was saying that, you know, those ones never really wake up for anything. Like, I can imagine that most of these Daleks are dormant, and it's like having energy to feed off knowing there are other people there. Like the one with Rory, when Rory like pushes the ice door and it comes back and it's like eggs. Like you can even when it's like eggs. That like they. Sorry, I think I hit my mic in there, but it's fine. That they might be dormant. If you
just winding yourself to do a Dalek impression. You know when he goes.
You only goes. Yeah, no, I think that's really a gross, creepy idea to think that the Daleks in there, even if they are dying, they never really die. Like they're just kind of like boiling away in their suits.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it?
Lovely. Should we talk for a little bit about Amy and Rory and where we find them in this episode? Because they're not in the best of places, are they?
They're not in the best of places. We open to the funniest scenes in Doctor Who history, which is Amy's...
I know I said it's true.
Feel the love, get it very do. And you've got this genuinely hilarious moment where Amy's got this curly hair on seat. That is like the finest gif that's ever come out of Doctor Who, and she does her fist. Love, hate.
Love,
and I
hate.
should have, when I tweeted out, what did you think of this episode? I should have used that gif, like, love, hate. No, I didn't use it. But, oh my God, this opening, before we get into the relationship of Amy and Rory, is so 2012. Everything about it. Oh my God.
It's like painfully. Rory's outfit with all the like layers.
Oh my God, the layers, the stripy top.
Amy looks great. I think Amy, you could drop her an episode today and I'd be like, you look so good. But Rory,
the skinny jeans, the male fashion assistant, everything he's wearing,
the hoodie under the jacket.
Yeah, it's just like it's just got a look that didn't look weird then.
The male fashion assistant. Oh my God. When I saw him and I literally was like, you look like you've come off Doctor Who Tumblr in 2012, like with the little bow tie.
You forget like the grip that Doctor Who Tumblr. I mean, we weren't on Twitter then. I don't think. I think Doctor Who Twitter.
No,
was Doctor
that was
Who
where
Tumblr.
we all lived.
Oh my God! And but you say this about Amelia. She had. I mean, they were trying to make that girl edgy. They had like, all right, we're gonna go black jacket, heavy black eyeliner,
dark eyeshadow,
which does not flatter Karen Gillan, who is very fair skinned. But it gave, I'm edgy Karen Gillan. Just very camp to have a modelling. I mean, but just the looks, they were distinctive.
Yeah, no, they were very, very distinctive. I think, this whole... Do you remember at the time, there were all these theories about what this series was going to be about, and like flashing lights was one of them, because when she's in the makeup seat, like the lights flashing. Christmas was one of them, because the Doctor, like every episode said, like, it's Christmas, that's on my Christmas list. And everyone kind of thought they knew what this series was going to be. And I think like with Amy being like dark and edgy, obviously it's talking about like where she is in life with Rory, but everyone was like, oh, Doctor Who's taking this cool turn, all these reasons. None of it ended up happening. That was Doctor Who Tumblr going crazy.
I don't remember any theories. I just remember when the trailer dropped, and I couldn't have been more delighted. They play the song that plays in the official soundtrack when Clara jumps into the Doctor's time stream. I don't know if the song is To Save the Doctor. I think it might be. And it's a slightly amped up version of that plays in this very epic, very cinematic trailer that I think has aged well.
I've seen a few people talk about the trailer, and I actually haven't watched it. I don't have any memory of this trailer. I'll watch it after we record.
Get the Series 7 trailer, but yes, we must stay on point. Amy and Rory,
yes,
their relationship.
Amy and Rory.
Right, you've got it down as a high, the kind of relationship development here with them having a falling out, them having a divorce, quite the falling out. Your husband's here. I don't have a husband. Well, apparently you do. And then, so that's it. We're not married anymore. Just like that. Just like magic. I was like...
See, I have it more as a high. So I agree with you that it's not like a pure high. There's like, I think that whole thing is really cringy. The contentious point of the reason they're getting divorced is because she is infertile and she thinks that Rory won't be able to handle that. Like, I don't think this is an entire high. The reason I have this in the highest of the episode is that I think that this is a very clever device to show the audience that Amy and Rory aren't the companions that they were in series 5 and 6. Their relationship with the Doctor has changed, and they now see the Doctor for sporadic visits. And I think that this was a really smart way in episode 1 of the series to show us that we aren't following Amy and Rory now. We're following the Doctor, and he is picking them up for odd visits, and time passes between the two of them. There's actually a really interesting line that Amy says when she's explaining to the Doctor that they're getting divorced. She says, but that's life, just life, you know, that thing that goes on when you're not there.
Yeah.
And it's showing us that, oh my God, like in the time since we last saw them, they're getting divorced. Whether or not you agree with the reasons why they're getting divorced, they are. Like, life is moving on for Amy and Rory, and we as the audience and the Doctor aren't there for it.
Right.
And I think that it ties the loop very nicely with the final episode, you know, the trip that went wrong, and how they could never really give the Doctor up, even though they weren't traveling with the Doctor in the same bed more. And I think that again in the next episode, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, when they meet like Cleopatra and stuff, and they're like, oh, like, you know, are they the new us? Like, you know, because you're not seeing us anymore, are they the new us? I think that it ties into Series 7A quite nicely. But I do agree with you that like there's a lot of cringy moments within that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It does well to communicate, I think, that point about life moving on. I do think it's super interesting as well what we explore a lot about, like, life without the Doctor, because the Ponds move towards this thing where they come on occasional adventures, but they have a house, they have a life, they have jobs. Not sure what Rory's job is actually at this point. Amy's modelling. What's Rory doing?
He's a nurse.
Of course.
He's a nurse.
I'm sorry.
He's always been a nurse.
I'm sorry. I mean, trying to explain their CVs must be quite funny. So you just took...
There are soldiers all in my house and I'm in my pants.
You just took 3 years off? Okay. No, cool. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, great. No. And then Clara does a lot of that as well when she comes along, with kind of occasional trips in the end. And is it Wednesdays she comes along? Is it Wednesday they go on a trip or something like that?
Something like that,
which is nice. It does do well on that point. I think it felt sudden for the audience because at Christmas time it was like, it's been 2 years, you forgot about us, and they lay a space at the Christmas table and they seem so happy, and then the next time we see them it's like, and that's it, we're done. So I guess because there hadn't been any hint that there was anything kind of under the surface. Make your case.
I know we've all seen this now, but did you watch Pond Life when it came out once a month?
I actually did watch Pond Life.
Because in Pond Life, you're watching their life, and then in the second to last bit, they're arguing.
Of course.
And then in the last bit, Amy comes in by herself, and it's after she's kicked Rory out, and she gets a voicemail from the Doctor. Or there's no voicemail, and she says, like, Raggedy Man, I need you. Like, so that was the only thing that kind of teased it, and I think that's why they did that, to show, like, you know, they have life, and even then I guess it's kind of sudden, but they were kind of leaning it, and I'm glad it, you know, only lasted for one episode. This wasn't a series-wide arc or something. I do think that talking about the Doctor and how he is at this point, there's that really sweet moment where she says, like, what can you do? And he's like, what can I do? Like, he's like, this is something that I need to fix. And I do think that, you know, for whatever reason, whether or not you agree with the infertility storyline, you get some fucking stellar acting from Karen Gillan here when Rory says, well, you know, it's clear, like, we both know it. And she's like, what? Like, I don't know what you mean. He's like, you don't need me to say it. Like, we know. And she's like, no, what? He says, the basic fact of our relationship is I love you more than you love me. And you can see her heart kind of break. And she is like sobbing and shouting through the tears. And she slaps him and she says, don't you ever, ever say that, because I gave you up and you don't know how painful that is. And I think that was some amazing, like, I didn't really think about it much until watching it this time, but it's some great acting.
It's great acting. A little harsh that she slaps him around the face for thinking that when he did wait 2,000 years for her. And ultimately, if she never told him why she was divorcing him and was just like, you know, in her head, I'm letting you go, but in reality was being a pretty cold ex-wife who, like, dropped him for unknown reasons. I don't know how she explained it to him. Yeah. I don't think they really said, like, how she'd explain their divorce to him.
Oh, I can't wait to have kids with you. Oh, we can't have kids. I don't like you anymore.
Yeah, like, when did this come up? Like, why didn't they feel able to? I just think maybe for, like, the strength of bond that the two of them must have developed over, like, 2 series of travel through time and space.
How could you divorce
together
each
for any
other?
number of times. Not even how could they divorce each other, but how could they avoid a conversation about just, like, you know, what do you want
Why
next?
Are we doing
like,
this?
I can't give you kids. How do you feel about that? How could they not? I don't know. It's just like, how do they not talk about that? But then, like, I don't know, straight couples, right? So straight representation, it's important.
It matters. Straight stories matter. I mean, maybe with the whole slap thing in that scene, maybe it's to do with the Dalek, like, DNA, like, thing, like, warping her mind. There's that, I like the Snyder comment from Osmond where she's like, doesn't she seem a bit angry to you? And then Amy's like, well, someone's never been to Scotland. Like,
the ugliest fucking titles I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
And also of the time, because we've been talking a little bit about here, like, the Tumblr era. And in those days, ladies and gents, we didn't share screenshots from iPlayer. We didn't upload high-res episode stills from the blackout.
It might become a GIF, and that's about it.
It would become a GIF, but it wouldn't just be a GIF. It'd be a GIF where you would apply a filter, whack up the saturation, whack up the contrast, turn it into something barely recognizable. People would apply their own subtitles in their own font. They would watermark it, and then in the end, they would export it with a width of 300 pixels. So you would have just a slew of online content, which is now still doing the rounds on all the GIF sites. But like that was how, looking at these titles, I'm like, this actually is very much in keeping.
No, it's
with
so
the aesthetic
2012
of, like, most Doctor Who blogs at that time, was just whack a filter on it.
Well, on that, I agree with you. They whacked a filter and they made every single episode a different, like, cut. Like, it was the series 5 titles, but they just added a filter and it looked shit. The
Awful.
title, like the actual title of Doctor Who, you know how it had all the dots on it? Have you ever heard this with Series 7A? So every single episode, and there's only 5 of them, the Doctor Who logo has a different texture. And it, like, especially when you see it in this episode out of context, it's really weird. It's got all these, like, dots on it, and you're like, why did they do this?
Yeah.
The texture of the Doctor Who logo is a clue as to what the episode's going to be about. So Asylum of the Daleks, those are all little Dalek bumps. The next one, it was reptile skin because they were dinosaurs. The third one, I believe, was a wood texture or maybe sand because they're in the Wild West. The fourth one, it's all the cubes in the background. And the fifth one, I believe, is the Statue of Liberty, like the very top of her hat, because of the Statue of Liberty and Angels. So they what bugs me is they actually did put thought into it, but those are the ugliest effing titles I've ever
creative.
Seen. Everybody's so creative.
There was someone in the Doctor Who, like, brand protection group at this point, right?
Yeah.
Who was like, please don't do this. Please don't do this. And someone else who was like, let's open the texture pack.
I don't know why they felt the need to do something new, because it just felt so, like, rehashed to me. Like, they took something they already had and just tried to, like, adapt it rather than doing a whole new thing. I'm so glad for Series 7B they did a whole new one, even though it didn't last very long. Like, it only lasted throughout 2013. One thing, just talking about like mixed and low point, the return of the copper Daleks is a mixed point for me, because I will always love them because they're the ones that I was introduced to the show with, and I didn't love the like Lego Power Ranger Daleks, but I do think that making the decision to just bring them back and be like, you know, those other ones, forget, I know that they're like in this one episode, but then they're like, forget them. They don't forget that they even existed. I think that created the problem that we've had up until now, where it's like any other redesign you want to do of a Dalek, don't worry about it, because we've still got these ones. Like the decision to so definitively bring them back and be like, no, they are the real ones, has, I think, damaged the Daleks in the long run, where I know they're going to be doing a redesign for Ncuti's era. I'm so curious, not just how they'll look, but also how the public's reaction is going to be.
Yeah.
Because an iconic gold Dalek is so iconic now.
Speaking of Dalek designs, at Sean Edits, who is a friend of the pod, we've met before, has a full, real Paradigm Dalek prop, and they've been tweeting the series of kind of renovation updates, which I just deeply admire. And they have the orange Paradigm Dalek, I think, and they've been kind of like spray painting it and looking after it, because these props aren't really made to last. They keep it in amazing condition for kind of exhibitions and things, but a lot of it is kind of made for screen and isn't necessarily meant. It's not made to be durable, right? And then in transport and stuff, they'll get scuffed. But has done this really cool job of renovating it. Plus, it just like when you see it in a living room, it's massive. Like in his living room, like, whoa. By the way, side note, you know that whole like, if I became a millionaire, I wouldn't tell anyone, but there'd be signs. So me. And I think they also have the gold Dalek, the bronze Dalek, sorry.
Oh, do you want to hear something cute with that? They propose. I don't know who proposed, but they're engaged or married. I'm pretty sure they're engaged. And they proposed by putting the ring in the Dalek plunger.
I love it. I
think that's so cute. For like a Whovian couple who have Daleks in the house, I think that's so cute.
Brilliant. I love that. And that, the thing is...
Davina McCall. I love that.
I love that. And seeing the two side by side, I mean, the Paradigm Dalek is so cool, so imposing. I actually think it's quite a cool redesign. I think the set they were placed in for their first episode was a lot of the problem. Anyway, the bronze Dalek next to it, the problem is it just is so iconic. It's so iconic now.
It's like, that's the real Dalek.
The Time War Dalek. But... it just is so cool. I see it and it just gives me a warm nostalgia, that Dalek. It feels like the definitive Dalek to me now. And if I was to ever have a Dalek for my house, which I love, if there are any generous donors who want to send Wholala their own Dalek, you can buy them for about $3,000. If you've got that lying around, that'd be great. We'll great.
You can donate to our coffee.
Yeah, if you go to our coffee, our co.fi, and you just want to drop...
donate us $3,000 or $4,000.
$3,000. We promise we'll spend it on a Dalek. That's really kind of you. Thank you.
Exactly.
What was I saying? What was I making?
I think that's your point. It was that they have a Paradigm Dalek and they've done it up and it looks...
Oh, cool. Yeah. I don't know what I'm saying about Paradigm Daleks. You know I have a love for weathered Daleks. I don't know why.
Oh, you love a tattered Dalek. Battle-worn.
Scratches an itch in my brain. And something like even just the set design on these episodes, I think these like interiors inside the Asylum, because they're damp, nasty, industrial. Grungy, that's what I want. They're grungy, horrid spaces. And so much of that lends itself to this really cinematic feel, I think, for this episode, because the light in it is so interesting. The scenes, they all feel really full of stuff. They feel like really immersive sets. But what I really, really love with these kind of weathered Daleks is they paid a lot of attention, I think, to the sound design. And when Rory is alone, surrounded by Daleks, there are a few moments where he kind of either like stumbles on like a bit of Dalek, like it's like loose on the floor and it has like a real like metal clang to it, or he kind of, my favorite bit, he pushes a Dalek head to the side and then it like rotates back again and it has this like metal grating sound and it sounds really heavy and rusted, and I don't know why that's just, to me, more convincing.
That's scratching your brain.
Yeah, than anything I've ever seen on the Daleks. It gives like a real visceral sense of like how like heavy and strong a Dalek casing is. Whereas we normally have this like whirring noise when a Dalek moves around, and they have like a sense of almost being quite like nimble. But with this, they're quite like hefty, and they feel like little tanks, and you kind of get that sense. I loved it. I love that. And when he like drops that orb, the egg, it's got that like, doom, doom. And I hadn't thought of a Dalek being really heavy.
Robust.
And I don't know why that pleased me. It just really pleased me in this. It made them feel like military weapons.
You have a very love-hate relationship with the Daleks in that, like, you just don't feel like they've been scary for a while and they should kind of be played as comedy characters. I think that this was a very good attempt. I don't know whether it was a whole success in that, like, you know, people are now scared of the Daleks, but I do think it at least shows the fear that people in universe have for the Daleks. I think that, yeah, making them robust and heavy and clangy, like, it just helps build that idea that they are, you know, threatening, menacing beings.
Yeah, I loved it. It probably nudged them more towards robots or even like little tanks, but I don't know why I liked it. I just did like it. It kind of avoided making the Daleks too campy this episode, and I agree what you are saying about in universe. It feels like in the future humans seem to know what Daleks are and be a lot more like. There's a moment in this where Clara says like, "Yeah, I know a Dalek when I see one," and Daleks are almost like a more widespread problem in the future. It's like, Daleks.
Oh god, Daleks are back.
One more thing I want to quickly shout out as well is there are lots of really properly creepy moments in this. We've talked about animated Dalek corpses. That's pretty horrid, you know, when they get into the crash ship and he's like, what? Like, all these people were fine a minute ago. And then he's like, oh, no, I died outside. I forgot I died. And
the
then
cold preserved my body.
The cold preserved my body. And it's like, really scary. And there's like, you know, horrible, like, just like
the noise of their skulls cracking when the eye stalk comes out. And it's like
they're
that.
Not like bone. They're like leathery. They're like they're like advanced decomposition. Oh, it's horrible. But that was great. And then even the conversation that the Doctor has with Amy about like, the conversion started, and she's like, "How do you know?" And it's like, "Because we've had this conversation 4 times." Terrifying, really scary. I think like playing with memory is quite scary.
Yeah.
And then what I really, really liked is the scene when Amy does see these like dancing Daleks. There's something to do with the camera here where they sort of attach this dolly cam to Karen Gillan. And like when she sways, the camera sways. And she kind of looks like so out of it. And like there's this kind of like hazy chromatic thing going on with the camera. And she's kind of swinging around. And she's like, "Who are you?" And she's kind of like swaying around. I love that scene so much. Makes me laugh so much every time.
Yeah, and there's also something creepy about like the Doctor not really paying attention and she's kind of doing her own thing, and he's talking to Oswin about like, you know, how many Daleks are there and are they active or not, and she's kind of warning him like, no, there's like you've got quite a big threat here. And then when he constantly realizes where Amy is, he's like, oh, and she's right in the middle of it, and she's also high as a kite. Amazing. Nice.
She's high as a kite in the middle of the Daleks. Sweet.
She's like, shh, this fun. They're just people. It's fine. And the Doctor's like, do you want to turn around?
Should we talk about Oswin Oswald?
I think we should. I think we should finish on Oswin, as she's such a big part of this episode. I remember, because they did announce that, you know, Amy and Rory were going to be leaving, and they had also, by this point, announced that Jenna Coleman was going to be the new companion. And I remember being like, oh my god, this is so interesting. We've never had a companion be introduced we had in Classic Who, like, Ace was introduced while Mel was still in the TARDIS. So it does happen, but at least in New Who, we hadn't really had a companion be introduced while the other companions are still there. And I remember being like, oh, that's so interesting. And then at the end of the episode, when she dies, I was like, oh my god, because I think they had just said like, oh, Jenna Louise Coleman will be playing the new companion. They hadn't named her, so when they were like, I'm Oswin, I was like, oh cool, Oswin Oswald, like, the new companion. And I just thought that was such an interesting way of introducing a companion, and left me so gagged that she didn't make it to the end of the episode. And I just think, I think Jenna Coleman's amazing throughout her whole tenure, and she only gets better and better as Clara. But I just think she was so good in this episode, right from the off. You know, when we talk about some doctors sometimes like brew and like get to know the character. With this one episode alone, I loved Oswin. I think she was funny, witty, emotional. Like I believed her. It really solidified for me at the time of watching that like, oh, this is going to be a really good companion.
Yeah, I agree. She was very magnetic. Jenna Coleman has such a presence on screen. She can come back to Doctor Who, I think, as anything ever. She could be the Doctor. She could be the Master. She can come back as Clara. I don't care. I love watching Jenna Coleman in, I think, anything. Even like in objectively bad shows. What she'd been on before this, actually, that I remember her being in was Waterloo Road. And I don't know if you've ever seen that story arc where she plays a schoolgirl.
I vaguely remember it, yeah.
She plays a schoolgirl. Spoilers here for anyone who's Waterloo Road watcher, I don't know who this is going to apply
like 15
to.
years behind.
Way behind. But there's this arc where she has killed her abusive dad with a knife, and her mum is taking the fall for it, and they're in court, and then she reveals in court in front of everyone that actually she did it, and it's this like shocking monologue. Like
she's crying in court, I remember, yeah.
But just like shockingly good acting. Anyway, to have her on this was just amazing. Yeah, but like from the word go, I've been an Oswin Oswald stan forever. Oswin Oswald specifically, I think, has got like something there that I almost like, dare I say, a little more than Clara. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe...
You've said before that she's, if not, certainly one of your favourite Claras,
Yeah.
including OG Clara.
Yeah, people like Victorian Clara a lot. I really like this one. There's something about her being quite chipper and just quite, I think, just very quick and very witty.
Yeah,
but kind of with a bit of a,
you need to, I think.
There's a cheekiness as well to Oswin, specifically, that's there. She's a real, like, tech genius, but the way she does it is quite fun. Just kind of like hacking the Dalek mainframe, but like kind of with her legs up on the sofa, just looking like.
I also think she has one of the best Clara outfits. Like, Clara has some great outfits, as we see later on. That I love this, like the red with the red trainers. Like, I just think it's such a good Clara outfit, even though it's not Clara.
Yeah, there's a flirtiness that is hit and miss. I, for the most part, love it. Flirting with Rory specifically, I really, really enjoy. The problematic
Nina bit.
line, the Nina bit's are low. The whole like, actually she was called Nina, great line. I was going through a phase, not a great line. If they'd said, learned a lot about myself that day, or whatever, would have been.
Do you think it's fair? And this is genuinely just like, as a queer podcast, I'm asking this question. I'm not saying my opinion one way or the other. Do you think it's fair for some people who probably identify as straight genuinely do go through phases where they are discovering their sexuality, and the end of that discovery is that they are straight, and they might say, do you think, because I agree with you, I think it's a problematic line, and I think there are a million ways they could have said it better, but do you think there is something fair about someone just trying to discover their sexuality and ending that journey of discovering they're straight and being like, I went through a bit of a phase and then I came out? Like,
obviously fine. The problem in this context, she describes herself as flirting. The issue with that is that she is saying it's flirty, it's hot for me to talk to a man about like my bi phase and talk about like my explorations with women because it's
I agree.
It's hot for you, it's kinky for you. And that's kind of where and then the issue is, and they were like, oh, well, also Clara is canonically bi. So that is how they described and introduced a bisexual character, was as someone who'd had a phase.
Yeah.
And if we're to believe that kind of every splinter of Clara has the same sexuality, because why wouldn't she? Then it's just an odd thing to throw in there. I think there's a Nina
in original
Clara's timeline as well, but I think Nina's a different person in that. So it's...
Well, seeing as she's not on the Starship Alaska.
I mean, 10 years ago, I think representation was very different on TV. It's worth saying this now.
Mm-hmm.
We're a queer pod. Let me have my earnest moment. And there was some horrific lines on TV that upset me. Because at that time, I had a really clear identity as being bi. And nowadays, I just go by queer because I'm obviously not that fussed. And I hated the way that those lines were delivered on TV. There was one in New Girl, I remember, that came up once about like, oh, why can't we find any real men? Everyone in here is either this or bi. And there was something similar said in Sex and the City once about bisexual men.
Oh, but Sex and the City was awful for not just bisexual. Yeah, they're like, why can't I find a real man?
Real men.
Like, it's something like
that line.
But they're awful with slurs and all kinds.
There were, but there was, I think, a lot said in just like pop culture that was quite acceptable about kind of like, you know, greedy or confused or
secretly gay.
Or going through a, you know, whatever. And I think that in that context, this line is unhelpful.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to be annoyed by this line.
I agree.
The rest of the flirtiness of Clara Oswald, I think, is quite fun. I think when she's kind of like with Rory, who is absolutely not warming to any of this flirting, as the most monogamous man there's ever been.
Yeah.
You know, she's like, pop your shirt off quick as you like, and he's like, why? And she's like, there's no reason. I quite liked it.
It is funny, yeah.
Of course, there's not going to be made for a world if it was the other way around. And there's a nice, like, clever, subtle change here as well in the way that she plays it versus original Clara. You'll notice the accent is a bit more like Southern accent. It just in the way that she says like "Happy birthday, Mum."
Yeah, no,
and not Mum.
No, it is.
And, it's just like,
She's doing, because when she did the Victorian one, I thought we were going to have Victorian Clara as real Clara.
yes.
And I remember being a bit like, oh gosh, she's going to do the voice like the whole time.
Oh,
But
what
you're
do
so
you
right
mean,
that
Snowmen, they remember. What are you talking about? What? You got a box that's smaller on the outside. Bloody heck. On the outside. Come on, in bloody sense.
Oh my God. No, but you're so right. Yeah, there's a subtle difference in her voice. And I do think, I wonder how much of Clara's storyline, certainly I believe up until the end of Series 7B, Moffat had kind of laid out already, it just fits the whole Clara storyline so well. And I think it's so clever. I love that at the end when Clara's like, I am human, run you clever boy, remember me. It's Clara's theme playing, like actual OG Clara's theme playing, like the da-na-na-na-na-na-na. And but even like the bit where the Doctor realizes her fate and he's like, does it seem real to you? And she's like, it is real. Like, it's so sad that, like, she has so much weight in both the humor, the sass, the quick, the wit, and the emotion in this episode.
Should we talk about the reveal?
Let's talk about the reveal.
The reveal. So we knew that Jenna Coleman had been cast, and I think we were all shocked that she turned up this early. They'd kept it a really successful secret. She hadn't been in the promos. To my knowledge, it didn't leak. It was a genuine surprise for everyone that Jenna Coleman appeared in this. So right after the credits, opening credits, we immediately see Jenna Coleman as a character in Doctor Who, and it was like, oh, this is where we're getting the companion. This is early. This is nice. And I remember finding that really, really shocking.
Yeah. No, me too. I remember being like, I was wondering when the episode started that he was going to drop Amy and Rory back on Earth and then keep Oswin around as a companion. Then like Amy and Rory might pop back, but that we'd now be following Oswin as the companion. And it was such a gag, yeah. The double gag at the end of like her being a Dalek. Because there's the two reveals. The reveal of Clara at the beginning and then the reveal that she's actually a Dalek. And like it has such a grossly human voice when it's like, I'm human. And like Nick Briggs just does such a good voice. And there's that scene of her, which again, think it would probably line up better if it was a Cyberman story. Because she's kind of chained to a wall in the flashbacks of her being converted with like wires all over her head. And she's like, I am not Dalek, I am human, I am. And then it like cuts to a Dalek voice over the top, like, not human, I am Dalek. Like, and you can see her mouth going, I am human, but the voice is saying, I am Dalek. And yeah, it was gaggy.
I was 17 at the time, but found this really scary. Probably old enough that I shouldn't have been as freaked out.
Wait, hold on. You were 17 in 2012?
No. What year is it?
You would have been, I think you'd been 15.
15?
Yeah.
I was 15 years old. Oh, thank God. And I remember getting probably quite rattled, genuinely quite scared by the conversion. The kind of like rapid cuts to her like, I'm not a Dalek, I'm a human, I'm not a Dalek. And she's like all wired up and in flashing lights and it's got these like shocking camera angles and it's kind of like half her voice, half a Dalek voice and she's crying. It's really unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Doctor is kind of leaning up close to the Dalek casing and peering through the mesh and it's like they did a full conversion, I desperately wanted to know, like,
is she
in a really
there?
Like twisted way, what can he see? Like, is she preserved within it? Is it something completely unrecognizable?
I wonder how much does it look like the squid? Like, surely not much.
Yeah, what's in there? And that like really troubled me. Like, what's in the casing? And I think they want you to wonder because you're inside Clara's dream space, peering out through what you realize isn't a screen, it's an eye stalk.
Yeah,
which was such a bloody good reveal.
Yeah,
and naturally you're curious about if this isn't real, what is? And I don't know, it's such a frightening thought.
Yeah, no, it is, because with Cybermen you kind of know. I'm never a big fan of when they just put a human body in a Cyberman suit and they're like, now you're a Cyberman. I like that it's like, no, we remove the brain and we do stuff to it and then whatever. So, but as far as I'm aware, and people call me out if I'm wrong, I don't think there's really been a Dalek conversion. But I know in Remembrance they had like the girl who became, I think, like the Dalek controller or something, but she just had like a Dalek hat put on top of her head. So in this context, I don't think we've really had a conversion like this before with a Dalek. And yeah, they never clarify what the Doctor does see, and I imagine he probably does see something, and it's probably quite horrific.
Unsavable. When we see her wired up, I don't know if there's like an implication that is what's in the casing, in which case she's kind of still got her coat on. But I think there's, we talk about like Doctor Who What If.
Yeah.
Like, we could do some Doctor Who What If storylines. What would we do? There's the Doctor Who What If where he takes Dalek Clara with him and and teleports them back to the ship. And they have adventures together.
Yeah.
He undoes the Dalek programming that's in her head, and it's just
Dalek
Dalek it's just Dalek Oswin. And Dalek Oswin and him, they travel the universe and they have a happy old
And they
time.
start meeting other Claras.
Yeah. And I also, the other, like, I wonder what that this created for me. The otherwise known as a thought was
Get another ice pack.
the other thought that's created for me was the whole time that Oswin is flirting with Rory over the speak system. Somewhere in that room, the Dalek is going, "Pop your clothes off, quick as you like." Does there have to be a reason?
The first boy I ever fancied was called Rory.
Actually, she was called Nina.
It's called Nina. I was going through a phase.
Anyone?
Oh my god!
Anyone with
that's
access
so
to a
funny.
ring modulator, please
Oh
re-record
my
those
god!
lines for us.
Please.
And it was all happening
I beg,
just in this
tweet
like
us.
quiet room with this like chain happening.
Do you reckon like Rory's voice was like on a speakerphone somewhere in the room?
Yeah,
And it's just
probably.
the chin and the nose. You two could fence.
Exactly. I want that adventure. I want
That's
that adventure.
so good.
I went back and I was
Oh my
really paying
God.
attention to like, wait, what do they actually hear? Did they hear Clara's voice? And they do hear Clara's voice, which again
They
is a question
do.
of
They
like,
do.
how do they hear Clara's voice? Because like, how do they hear Clara's voice? Does it synthesize
Maybe
it?
Dalek Clara still has a mouth.
Oh, I hate that.
Oh.
Because it can still sob. How can it sob? There's so many dark
They
questions.
hate you so much.
Why? There's looking back as well. Lots of little clues peppered in to the reveal.
Yeah.
There's the looking out of the ship window, which on reflection is kind of like the alternative to looking into the mesh of a Dalek. It was just one thing at the start when they're kind of peering out, and then later the Doctor's kind of peering in. There's that moment as well when the Doctor says like, "How much trouble, Mr. Pond?" But you don't see the Doctor, you see a Dalek, and it's almost like the Dalek is the one speaking. I feel like that was a little nod to it there. There's loads of other stuff in this as well. Like if you look around like the set, it's now obvious on reflection that that she was always
She's looking out
of an eye stalk inside like a little Dalek system there, and that she is the squid.
When she's like, "Oh, you're just outside. Come on in."
Come in.
I'm like, "Oh
starts
god."
packing
I
up.
remember at the time, and again, it's so like Tumblr-y, that the whole egg stir min 8. Everyone thought it was just like a recipe for a souffle with like eggs. You stir, cook for a few minutes, and then you ate it. Like everyone was saying, like, "Oh, that's how you make a souffle." Like I was like, okay.
Yeah. It's a fun, silly play as well on eggs and the lead up to eggs and the eggs and eggs was funny. The subtitles on the screen do show us eggs with Z's, which is good.
I really hope we have something like this in the new series. I love it's not happened tons, but when Doctor Who has a real a twist in the episode, but also a gagging in an episode like that we just weren't expecting something to happen. I think so many things get leaked, or leaking is a real issue at some point. And this is again a conversation for another episode, but leaks are a real problem. And I really hope that there's something in the new series that is a huge twist or a huge surprise that we just didn't see coming, and it just floors us as viewers. I think, like, because I agree, since then even I can't really think of many, if anything. Maybe the Doctor going blind, but even that, it wasn't as big of a thing. I don't know.
Oh yeah,
it was
I forgot
huge.
that
It was
happened.
huge.
Yeah. I can't see ever again. I'm blind.
I'm blind. Damn.
Stupid. Shall we play a very quick game, Sam? You know what? You play my game today. I'm going to read your things to you.
Okay, yeah, you go ahead. You read
Sam,
them to me, honey.
Would you like to play a little game of Camp or Down?
I would love to. I'd love to. Go ahead. Shoot me with the questions.
First, does it surprise you to know that Daleks have a concept of beauty? Camp
Oh,
or
I'm so
Down?
glad. so glad you're doing this because I just wanted to use it again. I think that's pretty camp. I think the reason that it is damp because he's saying, that hatred is beautiful, but in the concept of the naked prime minister.
The naked prime minister.
Surprise.
For wriggling around on
I
this
think
little
that's
mossy
camp.
rock. Pretty camp.
I think that's pretty camp.
The nose and the chin. You two could fence.
Camp or damp? I'll give it a camp. It's sort of like camp adjacent. It's silly. I think that there's a lot about Oswin that is camp, and I think that is just quite funny because those are the biggest. What would Amy's be? The chin, the nose, and the eyeshadow.
They kind of overemphasized those elements. Matt Smith does have an unusual face.
The legs. Amy be the
she
legs,
could
the
be
legs, those are the chin.
You're right. In fact, doesn't she
legs, the
become
nose,
that
the
at some point, isn't it?
She does. It's like the legs, the
nose,
chin, and Mrs. Robinson.
That's it. There it is.
That's it.
So she is the legs.
There you go.
Good God, that woman is made of legs. Do you ever see that Clara minisode? Yeah.
I forgot about that.
And then finally, actually, she was called Nina. I was going through a phase.
Damp boots. No, there's nothing camp about
It
that. There is
starts
certainly
camp.
something camp about strong bisexual Clara / Oswin, and then it just quite quickly gets damp. Well, thank you for that game, Alasdair. Would you like me to rattle through some fun facts this episode?
Give me some fun facts. I'm absolutely craving your fun facts.
Well, let me quench your thirst. So the BBC actually had to put a call out asking anyone who owned a Dalek to contact them because they didn't have enough Daleks to make this episode, specifically because they wanted to have Daleks from all different eras. One of the most iconic ones in this, and you have to spot carefully, is the special weapons Dalek, which is the one that is just the single cannon with no domed head, which it's only ever had one appearance before in Remembrance of the Daleks. And I just think it's such an iconic
love
Dalek.
it.
Look, I didn't really realise that it had only had one, but of course, when you think about it, because I think that was the last Dalek story to ever happen in Classic Who.
Yes, I adore the special weapons Dalek. It looks ridiculous. It looks like it's got a tiny helmet on its head, no eyes, or like a little space to maybe peer out of, and just a massive piss off laser at the front. And I love that. I think I went on the special weapons wiki because, of course, as you would, and someone's obviously written a whole page about this thing. I need a little model of it at some point. If anyone wants to,
I know there's an action figure of it somewhere out there, but I've looked. It's so expensive. I think again, I hate this. It's one of those B&M sets. It's probably 20 quid at the time. Well, I think now on eBay it's like £60 if you want to buy it.
If you want to send exactly £60 to our coffee, kidding.
Then we'll fight over it.
Yeah, we'll fight over it. You can have the top bit out of the bottom bit. And there was like why don't Daleks always just use a massive gigantic laser? And it was like, because it's like a bit nuclear, and that's why like the Dalek kind of pilot inside.
They need like a more pointed.
Well, they were like, it drives them mad, and that kind of canonically lines up with why it would have ended up in the asylum. Is that massive radiation coming off its gigantic gun essentially just sort of fried its little Dalek brain. It doesn't really need a person in it. They could have just done a drone, really, couldn't they?
Well, this is the thing. I think Daleks walk the line between needing to be a robot and needing to be something more alien, and maybe that's a bit too roboty.
The Daleks era really was... They could have realised they don't need to put a person inside their guns.
So one final fun fact I've got for you is that Osborn was originally conceived to be a fan of Elvis Presley, whose music would play throughout the adventure and inspired the Doctor to give her the nickname Blue Suede Shoes. However, when obtaining the rights to use these songs, it proved a little problematic, and that was why the soundtrack then got changed to Carmen to feature instead.
I mean, probably cheaper as well.
Definitely cheaper. I mean, I think that even in the new Priscilla Presley movie, they were like, we're not giving you any of this music to use. Well, thank you, Alasdair, for joining me on this little visit to the Asylum of the Daleks. And thank you, dear listener, for joining us too. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, you can please let us know on all of our social media. We're on TikTok, Threads, X, YouTube, all of which at Wholala Pod. And as always, you can rewatch old episodes of the podcast on our YouTube channel at Wholala Pod.
Yes, and if you're feeling very generous, please go ahead and follow the podcast and rate us a full 5 stars if you are on a platform that allows you to do that. You can also leave a little text review, I think, if you're on Apple Podcasts. We do read all those, and we very much appreciate them. And best of all, if you can share this episode with a friend who would also enjoy it, tweet us at HoodalaPod, tell us what you thought. What else can you do? Share it on your story. Do that. We'd really appreciate it.
And buy us a life-size Dalek.
Buy us a life-size Dalek. If you've got $3,000 lying around, we'd love to see it. Thanks.
Exactly. Well, speaking of the Daleks, next week we will be taking a little trip to the Fourth Doctor's era as we do a rewatch of Genesis of the Daleks. So, very excited for that.
Until then.
Until then, dear listener, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week. Have a lovely week.
Bye!